Why is it that a majority of therapy is actually not that effective? I'm going to utilize a metaphor to explore this. If you look at the structure of a sink, right, and that being connected to a well, for instance, right, the way that I see a majority of therapy approaching individuals and just mental health material is that they seek to put a filter on the faucet head rather than actually diving into the well and seeing that the well is contaminated. So the fascinating thing is that the way that a majority of therapy deals with clients' issues is that they explore band-aids for defense mechanisms rather than actually diving into the client's childhood. And the reality of the matter is that effective, long-lasting, long-term change for any individual requires going deep into the childhood of the individual to actually help them understand what it is that fucked them up, right? Somebody doesn't have anxiety for no reason. Somebody doesn't have depression for no reason. Somebody doesn't have their specific type of repetition compulsion for no fucking reason. Everything has an origin, and that's just the reality of it, right? And it's fascinating because I see it all over the place that, oh, have anxiety? Do this. Are you depressed? Do this. Lack motivation? Do this. Well, the most important this that anybody can do for themselves is to actually dive deep into their childhood and understanding their trauma, right? Again, you weren't born with anxiety. You weren't born with depression. Something happened in your childhood that fucked you up. And any therapist that does not explore that with you and instead just tries to take a fucking filter and be like, here, take this. We're going to screw this onto the head of your faucet so that you spit out something different, rather than diving into the fucking depths and darkness of the fucking well, right? And being like, holy shit, look at that really dark, murky, fucking contaminated water. That shit is the fucking root. But no, a majority of therapy does not focus on that. A majority of therapy is like, well, let's think different thoughts. And don't get me wrong, cognitive behavioral therapy is a real thing. It is. I don't know how effective it actually is. You can change your thoughts, you can change your feelings, you can change your actions, right? Don't get me wrong, I believe in all of that stuff. I really do. But I also believe in understanding every individual's foundation and seeing the cracks in that foundation. Because we all have them. Nobody's free of that. Every single person on the face of this planet has trauma, some level, whether big or small, right? The more the trauma, the more challenging it is for that person to just operate as an individual. And that's the reality of it, right? But really, the point of this video is to explore the very reality that a majority of therapy out there is actually not that effective. And so here's the fascinating thing, right? I'm going to call it for what I personally believe it is. I'm not claiming this as truth, as fact, or anything like that. But any therapy out there that has the professional, the licensed professional, hopefully licensed professional, saying that the person just needs to use these band-aids on these fucking wounds, anything that goes fast is a fucking red flag. And a majority of the therapy and the therapists that I have known out there and that I've seen has been exceedingly fast, right? Some therapists don't even have the capacity to go into depth with their clients, right? And that's the fascinating thing, too, because, like, if you're a therapist, the most important thing that you can do is help your client. That actually requires having exceedingly good boundaries, because the amount of therapists out there that actually quit on their clients because they just can't handle the dynamic that their clients are bringing them, it's just not effective, right? And don't get me wrong, there are some clients out there that are in a really fucked up state. They're not bad people. Not right or wrong or good or bad. It's just that any therapist is going to have a difficult time dealing with them if they are not trained to go deep and they have exceedingly good boundaries. That's the reality of it, right? But I think the most important thing to look at, honestly, is that a lot of therapists just provide band-aids for defense mechanisms, right? And instead of diving into the depths and darkness of any individual's well, right? They just go and they get the fucking Brita filter and they screw it onto the faucet head, right? Oh, look, you're spitting out something different. We did it. You're good. No. That's as good as a fucking New Year's resolution, quite honestly. Especially one that does not have enough lightning and thunder backing it to actually make any concrete, real, serious change. Based on everything that I've observed, we live in an era, I don't know if it's just an era, but from everything that I've observed, people want change in their lives fast. You know, yes, this is an era of instant gratification, of course, but lasting change for any individual does not come fast. You need to actually dive into yourself and understand everything. Like in, I believe it's Freudian psychology, repetition compulsion is a real thing, right? The act of keeping your childhood alive, the fucked up and unhealthy dynamics of your childhood alive through your adulthood, your adult life, through repetition compulsion, right? Have you ever wondered why your relationships suck? And by the way, I'm not here to solve your fucking life. I can't do that because I don't even know the person that's watching this video, right? But if your adult relationships suck, it is highly likely rooted in your childhood repetition compulsion and your unconscious and subconscious desire to keep the dynamics of childhood that were comfortable and familiar back then still alive right now. It can be entirely different, but it's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to happen by some licensed professional, not good or bad or right or wrong, but it's not going to happen by some licensed professional being like, let's work with your thought processes. Again, band-aids for defense mechanisms, right? Let's work with your cognitive distortions, your negative filtering. You see the world this way or that way. Let's see it this other way instead, right? This is all very surface level stuff. It's not good or bad or right or wrong, but the most sustainable transformation in any individual is reached with depth, right? Because at some point, that Brita filter that you've put on your faucet head is going to wear out and fall the fuck off. The same thing can be said for any individual who has the automatic, the autopilot program of repetition compulsion, right? The old program, don't get me wrong, this bright and shiny object is fantastic for you to work with, right? It's like, oh my God, if I just think differently, I'll be differently. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not at all, right? But how much more important is it for you to know why you even think that way to begin with? The way that you think didn't come from nowhere, right? The way that you see the world didn't come from nowhere. That was all programmed in childhood. That's the well. That's the foundation, right? Imagine you lift that well cover, you look down, and you see fucking it. And I'm just kidding. The clown. We're almost in spooky season. Well, not entirely. But anyway. Yeah, imagine you, like, open up that cover and you're like, oh, God. Like, you've finally figured out what the source of the issue is, right? That's really what it's all about. And so understanding that changes your entire life. It really does. And then working through it all and stuff, this, that, and the other. The main reason for this video is understanding that, I mean, I'm not claiming this as fact or as truth, just based on what it is that I've observed and what it is that I've heard. A majority of therapy out there is just not actually that effective because it doesn't go deep as necessary. It just focuses on band-aiding symptoms and defense mechanisms, right? For instance, the symptom is anxiety, Well, what if anxiety is the byproduct of repetition compulsion, and you choosing comfortable and familiar objects, referring to people, and other things as well, circumstances, events that recreate the anxiety? Okay, so what is the repetition compulsion? The repetition compulsion is you putting yourself in a relationship with a narcissist because it reminds you of mommy or daddy, right? Again, you're repeating the same comfortable patterns of comfort and familiarity. And that's just the reality of it. So, really understanding the origins of all that stuff goes well beyond just putting band-aids over symptoms. And putting band-aids over symptoms is, from what I've observed and experienced, a majority of how most therapy out there works. Might be somewhat effective over the short term, but just like trying to make any change in your life, if it's not solid in its foundation and it doesn't actually work over the long term, it's just not going to be effective. And that's the reality of it.